Joining me on the show today is Kelly Ruta, who's been a therapist for 2 decades and today coaches entrepreneurs and coaches. Even though Kelly has a lot of skills to manage the challenging things that we all face in life and knows how to handle them a little bit better than the average person, when she was hit with an illness that is still unresolved, her world was turned upside down. She shares how she got through those darkest times and how she continues to manage the challenges she still faces today. We talk about everything from surrendering to building a book of evidence and how to get back on track after experiencing an unexpected hardship. During our conversation, she shares a lot of really practical things you can use when you're facing a challenging circumstance, whether that's now or in the future. This was such a powerful conversation, and I know you guys are going to walk away with some really tangible things that you can implement in your own life. I can't wait for you to hear. Hey, Kelly, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Adrienne, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about the conversation we're going to have today.
Yeah, this is going to be something I think a lot of people will be able to relate to, at least on the topic level, because we're going to be talking about your experience with COVID. And the majority of people that are listening have either had COVID themselves or they know someone who has. It is something that has affected everyone, but it certainly affected you in a way that many people did not experience it. And that's why you're here today. So I'd love for you to kind of just take me back to that moment when you started feeling sick and you found out you had COVID. Like, take us back there.
Yeah, sure. So I got the original strain of COVID in 2020. And to this day, everybody around me says, I have no idea how you got this. Because in March, when things started to close down around here, the schools, and, my husband was home from work and whatever, I was really to the point of almost being obnoxiously careful. My doctor had called me and he said, look, you have asthma. This thing seems to be going after people's respiratory systems. It's March. You're done. You're not going anywhere, period. So I hunkered down at home, really didn't leave the house. And, the spring is a really bad allergy season for me, but by June or July, I live in the South. By June or July, the symptoms are pretty much gone. Mm-hmm. So early July came around and I started to get this really bad itching in my ears. And I thought, that's weird. It's not allergy season. So it just was getting worse and worse. And then I started having real, full-blown allergy symptoms. Didn't feel terrible. Called the doctor and he said, it's probably nothing, but come in because in the last 7 days, we've been seeing people come in with allergy symptoms and they're testing positive. I don't really think anything of it. I got tested. Back then, the tests took anywhere from 8 to 12 days to come back. And in that 8 to 12 day period, I started to get sicker and sicker and sicker. And the test came back positive. Wow. And I was shocked and it was terrifying. It was terrifying. What was happening to me was not affecting my respiratory system at all. So we were all a little confused. Mm-hmm. But within about a week of getting the test results back, I was completely bedridden for about 7 weeks.
Wow. Yeah. So what were the symptoms that you were having that were causing you to be bedridden? Like, what was happening?
Sure. So my blood pressure dropped into the 80s. So it was 88 over 55-ish. I could not sit up at all. I had severe debilitating fatigue, widespread body pain, severe headaches, sore throat, inner ear pain, joint pain. I started to lose vocabulary words. That was really bizarre. I'm not talking SAT words, Adrienne. I mean regular everyday vocabulary words. Yeah. I'd be in the middle of a sentence and could not remember what I was going to say. I couldn't remember any conversations I had had with pretty much anybody. And then one of the most bizarre symptoms was my eyes stopped tracking words. So I couldn't read. I couldn't text more than I'm okay or I'm not okay. And that was a very, very bizarre, scary symptom. So I went from having itchy ears to being totally disabled for 6 weeks, and then very ill for 10 months. Then I got it. I sort of started to get back to okay. I was working maybe 2 hours a day, just doing private one-on-one work to maintain my income, and then was in bed the other 22 hours of the day. And then I got COVID again.
Oh, wow.
And the second time I got it, I had a whole different experience. Felt like the flu really more than anything. I was shocked when I tested positive because it really just felt like a horrible flu.
Yeah.
But all the other symptoms came back with a vengeance: severe memory loss, brain fog, really intense fatigue, which is very different than exhaustion. People have never had like chronic fatigue or fatigue before. It's a really hard symptom to describe because you're tired, but really it feels like the plug that plugs you into life, that somebody yanked it out of the wall and you just cannot figure out how to plug it back in. Plus all of the widespread pain came back. So at the time of recording now, I've been diagnosed with long COVID, and it'll be 4 years this July.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is unlike any story I've heard from anybody. I've known some people that have gotten pretty ill, but nothing like that. What is going through your mind at this time? Because you're a business owner, you have a family, right? You have 2 children, you're married, and you're bedridden and barely functioning. Like, I'm curious where your mind was at that time. Like, what are you thinking?
So my initial thought, I'm actually just having the memories coming back to me right now from when I opened my laptop to check for my test results. I was checking like every 10 minutes because I wanted to know. And my initial thought was, oh my God, who did I get sick? It wasn't even, I think that's just the mom in me was instantaneously thinking, did I get my husband sick? Did I get my children sick? Did I what is happening? My second thought was, I am not going into the hospital because everybody that goes in is not coming out.
Yeah.
So my second thought was, whatever I need to do, whatever I need to try, I'm trying it because I am not going into that hospital. And then from there, all of the things that I really teach other people for a living kicked in. So it was all about being very disciplined about my thoughts, where I allowed them to go, not letting myself go down, a black hole that I couldn't pull myself out of. It was about asking for help, which is very difficult for me. I'm a super strong personality. I am used to being the giver of help, not always great at asking for it, but being debilitated to that degree really requires that you access grace for yourself and ask for what's needed. And then I had 6.5 to 7 weeks of practicing just being with my body, with my mind, with my fears, with my emotions, and tapping into grit, resilience, mental toughness, but also emotional agility, meaning being able to be with whatever feeling that came up. So terror, fear, frustration, doubt, hope, all of the feelings. And, they would come in waves all day long. I had a lot of trouble sleeping at night as well. So I slept better during the day. At night, I had a lot of trouble sleeping. And so anybody that has insomnia knows those thoughts in the middle of the night feel so much more dire than when the sun is out. So that's really, it was a practice time for me of firming up the skills that I had, but also that I teach, and just really practicing what I preach over and over and over so that I wouldn't lose hope. And so that I could manage my energy, because I had so very little of it that whatever was going on in my mind, that's where my energy went. And then I was kind of depleted for the day. So between practicing that and draining Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, like every movie streaming channel because I couldn't read, and reading is my go-to thing for enjoyment. That's really how I got through it.
So, so our audience knows you're a therapist, right?
I was for 20 years.
For 20 years. And you coach business owners and work with them on their mindset and stuff. So you have a level of experience that most people in this world don't have. And I can imagine how hard it would be for someone laying in bed. You're losing your ability to think, to remember words, to read, all of those things. These are very, very scary things for a person to experience, no matter what, no matter who they are, where they're from, it doesn't matter. And it feels natural. I'm just trying to put myself in that position of like, it would be really hard for me to not go down a tunnel of negativity and just spiral down and think worst case scenario. And it'd be really hard to stay out of that place, especially when you're fatigued, your body's fatigued, your mind's fatigued. And so it would be hard to deal with those things if your mind was fresh and full of energy, and it's not. And so tell us a little bit more in detail of like an example maybe of what you would do, because those negative thoughts and feelings are going to come, right? I believe the answer, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this, but I believe the answer isn't to ignore them or make them wrong or try to shove them down. And they're going to come no matter what. But what do you do when you're already feeling weak, you're already feeling down, and those things start flooding you? So
that's such a great question. And it's only in hindsight now that I'm able to answer it, right? At the time, I just got to get through another day, or another day that I didn't get in the hospital. So celebrating the smallest of wins. And this, I think, is big everywhere in life. And we have such a tendency to gloss over wins unless they're monumental. That's a really big mental, emotional mistake. So throughout the day, taking my blood pressure, taking my oxygen, and just celebrating that the numbers were okay or better than yesterday. Right. At the end of every day, making sure that I said, I made it through another day, and a lot of other people didn't, because that was the truth of the ticker basically that was on the news that I had to stop watching. And just being able to say, I'm so grateful that I got another day. And also, I just want to say, to your point, I don't want listeners to think in any way that I did not have the darkest of thoughts, that I did not look all of those in the face. They will come. Some days they will come gently. Some days they came with a vengeance. And so it's not that, I'm above those things or got to sidestep those things in any way, shape, or form. It's just that I know that when you push them away and you put yourself in a state of resistance, it just builds the energy behind kind of the darkness, so to speak, right? And then it just comes back at you and comes back at you. So fortunately or unfortunately, probably a little bit of both, I've had a lot of trauma in life that came prior to having COVID. And so being with dark thoughts and really difficult situations is something I'm kind of familiar with. Yeah. And so one of the takeaways was learning that being with the terror, the borderline panic, the rational and irrational fears, and just learning to be with them and feel my feelings and let my feelings just be there as long as they needed to be there, and then move when they were ready to move. That was a big part of it. The mental piece was about boundaries. So for me, I am really firm around boundaries with people, situations, and really in my own mind. I will acknowledge and sort of visit with momentarily the really negative scenarios that will pop up, but I will not have a party with them. I'm not hanging out for long periods of time. I know when I'm on the edge of going sort of down the rabbit hole, you can kind of feel it when you're right there teetering, and it's so tempting. but it is such a draining thing to do, and it does not build resilience. And I knew that I needed to be as gritty and resilient as possible, not just for me, but for my family who was quietly panicking.
Yeah.
So it was that reminder every day of acknowledge the thought, redirect your attention somewhere else. And that is the practice. So don't push down the thought. Don't get in the ring and go like 9 rounds with the thought. Just acknowledge where it's coming from. Don't push at it. Be able to say that is okay. Of course, that thought is popping up in this scenario. This is terrifying,
Okay.
but we're not going to sit and have lunch together, right? So where am I redirecting my thought at this moment? And it reminds me almost, I worked in private practice with a lot of people with addiction. And it reminded me a lot of the, one day at a time. This was more like 1 hour at a time.
Wow.
So that was the mental reframe is, okay, what do I need to do to get to the next hour and be in the best possible space I can be in? And again, it sounds simple, not easy though. It is that redirection of attention and the boundary that I am just unwilling to exist in that really awful space for too long of a period of time. Does that make sense the way I'm explaining it?
Yes. I wrote down so many things you said that I'm like, okay, how am I going to get back to all of these things? I want to point out one of the things you said was about like, what are the wins, right? There were a lot of things going wrong, and you could have dwelled on those things, and nobody would have made you wrong for dwelling on those things. But and there were times that you did, like you said, went
100%.
into really dark places.
100%.
But you found something each day, no matter how small it was or how insignificant, it might have seemed, that you found something every day to say, this was a win. Yeah. I'm still here. My blood pressure is getting better. My oxygen is getting better, whatever it was. And so I want to point out that strategy there for people listening. And then you talked about hour by hour instead of day by day. Mm-hmm. Some people would feel like they were losing the war, the battle of the mind, and not doing well if they were like, I have to reframe every single hour. I have to pull my thoughts back out every single hour. Mm-hmm. But I'm so glad that you said that, because sometimes in life we're hit with something so hard that you literally do have to pull it back every single hour. And we don't have to be like, well, today I messed it up today. I just didn't stay positive today, or I didn't focus on whatever day, or I wasn't grateful today. Yeah. And sometimes it isn't even about winning the day. It's about winning 1 hour at a time. And so I'm really glad that you shared that detail, because I think that we can tend to be all or nothing people. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, I'm either doing great or I suck. Right?
Well, but the mind prefers that. The mind prefers black and white because it takes less energy. It's one of the reasons why people hate the gray area, because living in the gray or learning to be comfortable in the gray requires discipline and energy, and it becomes a habit after a while if you practice it enough. But, any new habit we try to make, we're pushing back against because it's exhausting and I don't feel like doing it, but in a situation like this, the way I positioned it to myself was there is no other option. Yeah. There is no other option. I am not in control of what's going on in my body. I'm not in control of what this virus is doing. The doctors don't even know what to do. So what is the one thing that I can have command over right now? And it was the inner stuff. That was the only thing I could do, and listen to what my body was saying. So if my body said sleep, I slept. If my body said eat more, I did. I actually gained weight over those 6 weeks because my body was craving so much salt because my blood pressure was so low. Mm-hmm. I didn't care what I ate. I just said to my husband, make me the saltiest, greasiest, like egg and cheese sandwiches all the time. I did not care because bringing my blood pressure up was the win. Yeah. Right. And you speak to it so eloquently that this is part of the human condition. This is what we are going to want to do, but that's not how you win. It's not how you win. So the size of the win didn't matter. it was the practice of finding the win and committing to that every day that made the difference.
I love that. I think that's really important for people to hear. So you mentioned your family, like what's going on in the background? You're bedridden, you've got long COVID, you've got all these things that are greatly affecting you personally, but you have loved ones that are watching this happen to you in relationship with them. If you're open to it, I'd love to hear what was the dynamic there and what were they going through?
I'm absolutely open to it. It's a great question. For the first 6 weeks, I don't know because I was quarantined from them. So I did not see my children. Now my kids are older. I have one who's almost 20 and one who's 17. So this is 3 years ago. So 13 and 16. What I felt terribly about was they were no longer in school. One was doing well with online learning. He has a ton of social anxiety. So for him, being on a laptop at home was great.
Right.
My younger one's the only extrovert in the family. He tanked really quickly. I did not know that was going on because my husband was just trying to keep me fed and clean, to be honest, and just, the basics for me.
Yeah.
And he was coming in, masked with gloves and Lysol. Like I wasn't speaking to him. It was come in, help me bathe, bring me food and get out as quickly as you can. So for those first 6-ish weeks, until we felt it was safe, I really wasn't interacting with them other than Mom, I love you texts. I'm thinking about you. They were frightened. They were really frightened. But because they were teenagers, kids are egocentric. They're more into what's happening in their lives, which is not selfish. It's just developmentally appropriate. So they were more worried about their friendships and what was happening at school, their own mental health, their own, my whole world just got turned on its ear. And I know my mom's not well, but I don't know a whole lot about what's going on with her. I just know it's not safe for me to go in there.
Yeah.
So I think like all kids who were developing during the pandemic, I think there's long-term ramifications and implications of having gone through a pandemic period, but then a pandemic with a sick parent adds a whole other layer to it. Yeah. And for my husband, I think it really my husband's an engineer. We are wired very, very differently, An
engineer and a therapist.
Oh yeah. Let me tell you, we could have drinks at the bar and have some interesting conversations about that alone. But in a situation like that, all he's thinking about are what boxes do I need to check to make everything
very logical.
Okay. Yes. So the emotional support was not there, not because he doesn't love me or didn't care or whatever. He was in go mode.
Yeah, of course. He's in survival.
Feeder, cleaner, take care of the kids, take care of the animals, make sure I'm bringing money in. Yeah. That's the kind of stuff he was doing. And then what I love to call my front row, the people in my life, mostly it's the women in my life, were texting and emailing, and I couldn't really talk on the phone, but they were doing whatever they can to remind me that I was constantly thought of, that the love was consistent and unconditional, that they were holding space. Some of them are people of faith, some of them are not. So some were praying and some were holding space, whatever it was. Yeah. And so I knew, even if I wasn't talking to the closest people, I knew I was loved and I knew I was supported, which was a big deal. My husband shows it in one way, my friends show it in another way, right? So I had to just keep reminding myself, there's so much love, there's so much energy coming towards me, and that when I come out of this, then I will be able to help my kids get whatever they need to readjust.
Yeah. I can relate to that. I had a surgery and I was recovering from surgery and I was in a lot of pain and I couldn't really do anything. And my kids, they love me and care about me, but they weren't too concerned with me, Yeah. And there was a part of me that was like, I want them to be like worried about me and checking on me and like, can I do anything for you, Mom? Like, do you need anything? And then I had to like kind of check myself there, and I was like, number one, it's not their responsibility to, to fill that need for me. But they do, like, they love us, but they tend to really be very short-sighted in what's right in front of them. And so that was a blessing in many ways, because, you know, at a different age for them, whether younger or older, whichever, that could have created even more anxiety and worry for them. And so it probably is a little bit of a blessing that they were teenagers during that time period. And so I want to point out something that you just said that I think a lot of us make a mistake in our relationships. And I'm going to go a little sideways here, but then I'm going to come back. Is your husband, because of his personality, because of his role during all this, whatever, was able to support you and take care of you logistically.
Yes.
Right? And that was his strength.
Yes.
And I love that you had a group of people that could take care of you emotionally.
Yes.
Right? And in one way. And I think that sometimes people want their spouse to be all of those things. And then if they can't be, then I don't feel supported, or I don't feel loved, or I don't feel cared about. And that can do a lot of damage to a relationship. And so I love how you pointed out that, like, you had one set of people that were able to fill a need for you in one way, and another set of people in another way. And it allowed you to feel fully supported and cared for as a whole, instead of feeling like, well, I wish my husband did this, or I wish blah, 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 blah did this. And that can be a dangerous place to go.
Let me be honest for 1 second, though, just for clarity's sake for the audience. I have done that many times.
Yeah, we all have. We all have. That's what I want to point out.
Yeah, I don't want it to seem like that just because I was a therapist and I should have known better, that I never did that. No, I absolutely have done that to him. Yeah. He has also done it in reverse, because the way we analyze things, I'm very good at analyzing people. He's very good at analyzing systems. So I think it was a matter of, I mean, we've been together 24 years. So it was a matter of getting to a point where you begin to understand that love and respect are not expressed the same way by everybody. And that, you know, at a point in our relationship, I had to say, I need you to step up your emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And he has said to me, I need you. I am very visionary. And the way he puts it as, you know, I need you to come back to the earth for a hot minute so we can work out like the details, right? So I think that's the key, is understanding what is your partner or your spouse's strength? How do they show love so you're not misinterpreting it, right? And also, it's okay to ask each other to step up, not change yourself as a human, but just step up that skill set a little bit so that you're meeting each other in a better place. So the truth is, I saw this more in hindsight than I did in the moment, but that was one of the big takeaways. And same thing for my boys. I have one boy who is much more about the emotions and the affection and that. And I have my younger son is much quieter, much more of an internal sort of processor, and shows love in very different ways. And so it's just a matter of interpreting things so that it's a win for everybody, I think maybe is the best way to put it.
Yeah. And like you said, you know, you don't do it perfectly, and sometimes you don't realize it till afterwards. But I just wanted to point that out, because if we are able, you know, to reflect when we're in a moment where we're feeling uncared about or unsupported in whatever way from our spouse, being able to look at it a little bit more objectively.
Absolutely.
And say, they're really good at making me feel loved in this way. And I can either get upset. And yes, there is a little bit of meeting in the middle, right? There is stuff that they can work on to get better. But our spouse doesn't have to be the one that fills all of our needs.
No, I believe actually that they shouldn't.
Yeah.
That is not the role of a spouse to fill all of our needs. I feel that a spouse brings a certain set. You as an individual are responsible for filling some of your own needs, and then building our friendships and other relationships, whether they're work or, you know, from school or from volunteering or, you know, church, whatever it may be, that we have to seek out different relationships. And one of those relationships is with ourself, you know, or else there comes this opportunity or vulnerability is a better word for some really dysfunctional codependency, if that doesn't exist. And also it can breed intense resentment in a marriage. And that's just not healthy to expect everything to come from one other person.
Yeah.
I think we've been fed that message about marriage for a long time. I mean, I'm Gen X, I'm in my 50s, and this is, marriage was made out to be the be all end all to me. And it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. And so putting that on your spouse, I think, is too heavy of a burden.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, for sure.
So you mentioned long COVID, and I've heard that term, here and there, but I can't say that I really understand it. And it probably looks a little bit different for everyone. And and so knowing that, it's at least speaking from me, if I know I'm going through something really hard, a lot of times what I tell myself to get through it is, this is temporary, Adrienne. This is temporary. It's not going to last forever. Just take it one day at a time, like 1 hour at a time, right? Like, this is temporary.
Yeah.
But what happens mentally, emotionally, all the things, when what you're facing might not be temporary? And really, you don't even know. There's so much uncertainty about the future that you don't even know. Is this 6 months? Is this a year? What is this? Like, I want to talk about that, because that's different than being like, okay, I have this temporary situation. It's hard, but I'm going to get through it. Right.
Absolutely. This has been, you hit it on the head so perfectly. This has been the crux of the challenge for me. I feel like everything else about this situation, I've been able to, work out, get on the other side of, whatever. The human beings don't do well with the not knowing part, even though we technically live every day not knowing when the last day is going to be, right? That's the nature of the beast. But when you're presented with an injury or an illness that doesn't necessarily have any end in sight, it is really, really challenging. I consider myself to be a very mentally and emotionally strong person, and this has kicked my butt, this particular facet of this whole situation. So this is where my work is focused almost every day when it comes to this. And it's a mixture of, because for me, being well educated on certain things is very helpful for me. I don't like relying on doctors for everything, especially as a woman. I now have a great team of doctors, but in the past, I've had doctors that poo-pooed a lot of things, called things psychosomatic, as if I didn't know what that word meant, which was hilarious. and really just kind of downplayed a lot of things. And I think that that's a gender bias. That's a whole other conversation. But so staying educated, fortunately, I know how to read and dissect a research paper just from going to grad school. So I read a lot of the research as it's coming out. I am so fortunate to have gotten one of the spots in UNC Chapel Hill's long COVID clinic here in North Carolina. So I work with an infectious disease specialist who's her training and her experience is mind blowing. But the truth is, she's probably one of the best in the country, and she will look me in the face and say, we don't know. She's very honest. And I've asked her to be very honest. So every day, it's a question of, how do I reorient myself to the reality of this without giving up, giving in, collapsing, becoming hopeless, getting depressed, all of the things, right? And it's very hard. And some days I don't win. Some days I don't. And those are the days, part of having long COVID for a big chunk of the population of us that have it. And there are millions of us. Be like very clear. I'm in one online group and there's 250,000 people in this one group.
Wow.
And they range anywhere from mild, lingering, annoying symptoms to completely bedridden, disabled, cannot work. And then me, who's kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
But one of the ongoing problems is I will have what's kind of called a flare up. So I will be like today, I can be high energy and feeling pretty good. I don't feel how I felt pre-COVID. I don't know if I'll ever be that well, but I feel well enough to work and engage in life and pain's under control, that kind of stuff. And I can wake up tomorrow and not be able to get out of bed. And it's now I've had it long enough that I can I see the symptoms when they're coming and I'm like, oh, I feel something coming on. There are a couple things I can do to try to slow it down or prevent it, or at least reduce the intensity of it. But I will tell you, I was in a flare up from the middle of December until 10 days ago. It was 6 weeks and it was brutal. It was brutal. So the not knowing has triggered in me a practice of surrender. And let me tell you, my personality does not lend well to surrender.
Mine either.
I think we're both Enneagram 8s,
yes,
right? I would guess that you're an 8.
Yes.
It is like, get up and fight, get up and fight. And one thing with this illness is fighting will make you sicker. It will make you sicker. And I learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
So I had to manage my ego, and I still have to manage my ego all the time and be like, no, your way is not necessarily the best way in this situation. Listen to your body. Your body is wise. And I've had to practice surrender. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. What I do like are the payoffs of being in a kind of mindset and energy of, I'm not going to resist what is right now, because then that leaves me open to what could be tomorrow or next week or next month. Right. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. This is a practice of necessity, not preference.
Yeah.
I would prefer to come up swinging. That is always my go-to, but that will not work in this situation. So
what is an example of what surrender looks like? Can you tell us, like, if you're like, I need to surrender, what does that look like?
Oh yeah. Cause this just happened 2 weeks ago. It's fresh in my memory.
This is fresh in my mind.
Oh yeah. So when I'm having a flare up, I can be like 2 weeks into it, and then I'll wake up and I'll have a day where I'm like, oh, I think I'm feeling better. And what I want to do when I'm feeling better is go do the things I love to do, but I'm also doing like the urgency is, oh my God, tomorrow might not be good. So I want to go do everything today. The sun is out. I feel good. I don't have any brain fog today. I can concentrate. This is great. This is great. And I have to really surrender to the truth that if I do that on a day when I don't feel well, or when I am feeling well, it is a guarantee that the next day I will not be well. And I have 2 friends in particular who I will text and say, I'm having a really hard time resisting this urge. Yeah. I want to go outside and do things. I want to work. I really want to dive into my work heavy today because I love my work. Yeah. And they will lovingly but firmly remind me of what I already know and help me to make a better choice, because I don't always have what it takes to make that best choice on my own. Sometimes I do, but I have to be reminded to surrender.
Do you just do one thing you want to do? Because then when do you know that you are feeling good again and you can do all the things? So do you just like gradually dip your toe in it?
So that's a really good question. And what I've come to understand from being in that group I mentioned is that it is very different for everybody. For me, in the middle of a flare up like that, I can do a couple of things. I will feel like I can do more, but I know I have to stop after a couple of things. And it is immensely frustrating. Once I've had about 3 back-to-back days where I am feeling better, I know I'm coming out of it and that I am transitioning into being out of a flare-up. And then I slowly can build back up. But again, it is very, very hard, but that's what surrender looks like to me. Yeah. It's these practices of choosing what's in my best interest over what I actually want to do, because I'm playing the long game.
Right.
And playing the long game with a chronic illness looks very different than playing the long game without one.
Yeah.
Energy management looks different. Things I say yes to look very different now than what I used to be able to say yes to. And so that's a recent example.
Yeah.
Also, another one that has been kind of long term, there is kind of this ongoing argument about exercise. Exercise for me, and I was a college athlete. I played competitive sports till I was 30. So I met my husband in a gym. I mean, like, working out was always part of my life. I cannot work out. I can't even do long walks because I have something called PEMS, PEMS, which is post-exertional malaise syndrome. When I exercise, I get ill. And what the science is starting to show is that the virus has damaged mitochondria in the cells for a lot of people. So I don't make energy the way normal people make energy. I don't restore energy the way normal people restore energy. So when I go to exercise, it actually makes me ill.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really, really challenging because it's great for mental health and all kinds of other things, right? So, but that's another surrender practice, is like the part of me that used to be squatting in the gym is going, I'm winded doing a flight of stairs right now. What the heck? What am I doing? Go do something. But, the rest of me knows that is not the current situation. And you have to surrender to that for now. And I just remind myself all the time, if and when this changes, I will get to make different choices. But for now, this is what I'm choosing on for my own well-being. And the better I am, the better the people around me are as well. Yeah. So that I have to keep that in mind about my kids. They still live with me. And when I am not well, it really impacts them. Even on the days when I'm having a flare up and I'm taking 2 naps, or in between all of my calls, I have to go lay down. I can see it on their faces. And I get a lot of like, you okay? You okay? Yeah. So I have to manage it for me, but I also choose to manage it for them as well.
Yeah. Well, surrender, the word surrender, for someone like you and I, probably feels like giving up, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, when you tell me to surrender, you're telling me just to give up, right? To not care, to just let it all go. But surrender actually requires a lot of discipline. Like you said, you have to choose today to deny yourself of what you really want so that you can have the long-term result that's better, right? So that requires discipline to say, I really want to do this, but I know that the long-term thing is better. And so I'm going to choose to not do this today in an effort to have the long-term result that I want.
Yes.
And surrendering that requires discipline and making hard choices. And so I just wanted to kind of bring that together, because sometimes people can hear the word surrender and think, well, you're just giving up, right? And it's actually quite the opposite. And it takes a lot of strength and repeating over and over and over some things to yourself to remind yourself, like you said, that you're making a choice that's for the long term, not just today.
Yeah. And for the people who are listening, who are nodding their head when you say, no, just it feels like throwing in the towel and giving up. The 2 things that helped me really sort of reframe that was understanding that surrender is actually just an acceptance practice. That's all it is. It's not a giving up. It's a standing there and saying, I'm not trying to be dismissive here, but it is what it is right now. Yeah. And not allowing myself to run 10 years into the future with it, right? I just don't know. But for today, I'm accepting that this is what it is. Yeah. And then the second thing is a practice of choose your hard. There's almost everything in life is hard. So just being discerning enough to say, okay, these 5 different things are hard, but I get to choose my hard. And so for me, the hard is the discipline, the practice of it, day in and day out, versus the hard of longer, more frequent, more intense flare-ups because I didn't do that.
Yeah.
So that's the way I try to reframe it and remind myself, because I still need reminding all the time, but remind myself that that's what I'm doing, is I'm being discerning about my choices right now. And those two things are what really help me to be less cranky about having to surrender and seeing it more as, oh, no, I'm exercising a choice to do this that's in my best interest.
Yeah. So looking back now, how long has this been now? You said 3 years, 4 years?
It will be 4 years in July.
Okay. So 4 years, if you had to look back and find the unexpected gift or the unexpected blessing from this, and I know that's probably really hard to do. Is there one that you can think of that came, something good that came from this?
I have to say there's more than one. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this because it helps me build up the energy I need to be disciplined. And I'm not an everything happens for a reason person. I don't think there was this was not necessary in my life, is what I'm trying to say. I say to the universe all the time, like, you can send me lessons in a little bit of an easier way if you're up for it. Like, it didn't need to be that hard. But I do always look for kind of the golden nuggets in any really difficult experience. So there are many, but the one that I am consistently so grateful for is that I have walked away with a deep, deep knowing that the only thing that is going to take me out of the game is the thing that's going to take me out of this life. So when I am met with a personal challenge, a business challenge, any challenge, I'm like, bring it on. Because if I got through that and it didn't break me, and that isn't the only thing that's, been pretty significant in life that's been thrown my way.
We could do like 10 shows together with all the things you've dealt with.
Unfortunately, yes. But really, truly, I meet a difficult person, or I'm put in a difficult situation, or, I have such a grounded sense of confidence in myself that doesn't come from outside stuff. It's from just knowing what I'm capable of, that I kind of meet challenges and push back with like a wink and a smile now. And it makes me laugh a little bit, but I really have this deep sense of knowing what I am capable of, and bringing that just into my everyday life, into my work, feels like such a profound gift. And I'm asked often, have you always been this confident? Which makes me laugh, because I think back to myself as a kid and a teenager, even in my early 20s, and I'm like, no, not even close. But this is, if you allow it to be, this is the gift that having a tough life can give you, if you let it,
Yeah.
So I'd say
the
that's
resilience muscle, everything that you've faced.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. And when you can own how resilient you are, like truly own it, acknowledge it, embody it, it is a natural kind of pipeline to building confidence, because you just know that what life throws at you, you might not appreciate it. I'm not saying it's all rainbows and puppies.
Happy about it.
Don't get me wrong. I will be cranky about it, but I have no doubt in my ability to navigate it. And now that I also know that I don't have to navigate it by myself, I don't have to be this hyper independent woman, that these relationships that I've built are such a source of so many things for me. Like, what's going to stop me at this point, other than the thing that shows up to finish me?
Right.
That's it. And that's sort of how I move through life and work now.
Yeah. I love that. So any last thoughts for our listeners, someone who's listening right now that's facing something that they don't know when it's going to end, or how it's going to end, or if life is ever going to be normal again? Any last words or things you want to share?
Yes. A couple of things. Number one, it's okay. Give yourself permission to call a spade a spade. When something awful happens, I'm not into this toxic positivity movement. Like, let's be very clear. And when something is awful, you get to say it's awful. When something is terrifying, you get to say it's terrifying. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human.
Yeah.
Where you have to be mindful is going from acknowledging the awfulness of it to becoming, to identifying yourself as a victim. I have been victimized multiple times. I do not identify as a victim.
Yeah.
Those are two totally separate things. You can be victimized by a person, a situation, an experience, but you don't have to adopt the identity of a victim. That will not serve you well. So please understand that those are two separate things, right?
Yes.
The second thing is, I know that when you're met with a situation like this, all of a sudden what comes into very sharp focus is, I don't know what tomorrow brings. And that can be really scary. But the truth is, you never did. Nobody does. It's just when these occurrences happen, all of a sudden it's very triggering and it's very confronting, this reality of, oh, actually, I have no idea what's going to happen. You never did. So it's okay to not know. It's okay to accept that none of us knows, and we're going to make our best plans, right? So if you can accept that the truth is you never did know, you just thought maybe you did, or you had more of a sense of control, which is all fake anyway. All you need to do, and again, I'm not trying to be like reductive about this, but you just need to reorient yourself to the situation. You didn't know, you never did, and you've made it all the way up until now, not knowing.
Yes.
Also, you've survived every single thing that's happened to you up until today, every single thing. Do yourself a favor. I tell clients to do this all the time. After you listen to this episode, go grab a piece of paper, number from 1 to 10, and write down every situation that has threatened your mental, emotional, physical, or financial survival that you've made through. Make a list of 10. And then after looking at that, try to convince yourself that you're not resilient, that you don't have what it takes to get through. You're not going to be able to convince yourself after you've made that list. Just too many of us gloss over the amazing things we've survived on all different levels. But when you look at it on a piece of paper, you're going to be like, holy cow, actually, I am kind of strong, or I'm kind of resilient, gritty, amazing, whatever the words are. So keep adding to that list, because it's the proof your brain and your mind needs to keep going.
Yeah. Well, and that's so perfect that you said that, because I have a resilience playbook in there about ways to be resilient. And one of them is to build a book of evidence. And that's exactly what you're talking about right now, is writing down all of the things that you did survive, that you did make it through, that you did figure out, that worked out, what are all the things, so that in those moments when you're going down the spiral and the rabbit hole of negativity and you feel like you can't pull yourself out, you can pull out that book of evidence to remind yourself. And even if it's in every hour that, you can do hard things, right?
Yes.
So this has been absolutely wonderful to have you here, Kelly. I'm so grateful for just your openness and sharing what you went through and how you made it through. Could you just tell our listeners, if they want to know more about you and what you do today, just share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And just let me start by saying I'm so grateful for the opportunity, not just to tell my story, but I think we need to hear more of these kinds of stories. And your podcast is such a great avenue for stories that can really feed people what they need to be resilient. So I'm just incredibly grateful that you invited me on here. And the easiest place to find me is on Instagram. I am in my own DMs. It's at Kelly S. Ruta, RUTA. I answer all my own messages. It's not somebody on my team. So pop in, leave a voice message, let's start a dialogue. And I, would be happy to answer any follow-up questions that a listener might have about the episode. Just shoot me a message over on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today and sharing with us. This was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode. This story was a remarkable testament to human resilience, courage, and perseverance. To help you manage the ups and downs of your own life journey, I have a special gift for you called the Resilience Playbook. This free guide includes 12 resilience factors that gave me hope, inspiration, and empowerment during some of my darkest times. Whether you're navigating the ups and downs of a relationship, maybe you're facing unexpected twists in your career or your business, or you're tackling personal health challenges, whatever that challenge is in your life today, this playbook will equip you with the tools you need to strengthen your resilience muscle. To get your copy, find me on Instagram and send me a DM with the words playbook, or you can simply click the link in the show notes. Before we part ways today, I want to remind you that you can do hard things, and that strength lies within you just waiting to be unveiled. I hope you'll carry the lessons shared today with you as you grow, evolve, and strengthen your resolve. If you enjoyed this episode, be a good friend and share it with someone you know could use it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. Until next time, take care, my friend.